David Bowie was a musical chameleon, bold, brilliant, and constantly reinventing himself. But that same fearless creativity rubbed some rock legends the wrong way. Whether it was his wild personas, his ever-changing sound, or a sharp comment in an interview, Bowie didn't always make friends in the industry. Some of the biggest names in rock didn't just dislike him, they flat out couldn't stand him. So which legendary artists had serious issues with the Thin White Duke? Let's take a closer look. Number 1. Bob Dylan, Cold Shoulder from a Hero. David Bowie looked up to Bob Dylan like a true fan. Dylan's lyrics, mysterious vibe, and genre-defining style made a big impact on Bowie's early work. In fact, Bowie even wrote a song called Song for Bob Dylan on his 1971 album Hunky Dory. Part tribute, part critique. He admired Dylan, but also questioned how his raw, honest style had become so distant and cryptic. Over the years, Bowie and Dylan's paths crossed a few times. Bowie hoped they could connect, maybe even collaborate, but it never happened. Instead, Bowie got silence. One of the most disappointing moments came when Bowie went to see Dylan perform in New York. Dylan knew he was there, but ignored him completely. Bowie was crushed. They'd actually met once before, at a friend's house. Bowie was excited, trying to start a real conversation. But Dylan barely responded. He just seemed uninterested. Bowie even gave him his number, hoping they'd talk again. But Dylan never called. Years later, Bowie admitted that all he really wanted was for Dylan to acknowledge him, as an artist, as a peer. But Dylan's indifference left Bowie feeling dismissed. He never understood why Dylan was so cold. Maybe Dylan was just private, or maybe he didn't care for Bowie's style. Either way, the rejection stuck with Bowie for years. Even as time passed and Dylan seemed more polite in public, Bowie still believed the folk legend just didn't like him. It's a sad example of how sometimes admiration isn't returned, and how even icons can be hurt when their heroes turn away. Number 2. Keith Richards, Just a Showman. Keith Richards has never been one to sugarcoat things. If he doesn't like something, or someone, he'll say it. And when it came to David Bowie, his opinion was not exactly kind. While Richards didn't say he hated Bowie outright, he didn't hold back when talking about what he really thought of him. To Richards, Bowie was all flash and no soul. He saw Bowie less as a serious musician and more as a performer wrapped in costumes and drama. While the world praised Bowie for constantly reinventing himself, Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, the Thin White Duke, Richards thought it was all a gimmick. In his view, Bowie changed his image to stay popular, not because he was evolving artistically. Richards is all about the roots of rock, raw, bluesy, and real. Bowie's theatrical style, spacey sounds, and polished image just didn't click with him. He even questioned Bowie's talent, saying there was nothing in his music that really grabbed him. No moment that gave him chills. And for someone like Richards, who lives for that gut punch feeling music can deliver, that said everything. But even Keith had one small exception. He once admitted that he liked Bowie's song changes. Just that one. He thought the melody and songwriting were solid. But aside from that rare compliment, Richards didn't have much nice to say. He just didn't get Bowie's whole thing. Their views on music couldn't have been more different. Richards stood for gritty, unpolished rock and roll. Bowie was about pushing limits, trying new sounds, and transforming again and again. For Richards, that kind of constant change felt fake. For Bowie, it was just who he was. What's interesting is that Bowie never really responded to Richards's digs. He didn't seem bothered. Maybe he knew they were too different to ever really see eye to eye. Or maybe he just didn't care. Either way, Richards remained one of Bowie's most vocal critics, proof that even in a world full of rock legends, not everyone sees genius the same way. 3. George Harrison. Make up your mind, David. George Harrison usually kept things chill. After the Beatles, he leaned into spirituality, stayed out of drama, and focused on meaningful music. But when it came to David Bowie, he didn't hold back. In a 1976 interview with India Today, Harrison took direct shots, not just at Bowie's music, but at who he was as an artist. Harrison praised people like Bob Dylan and Stevie Wonder, saying he admired their depth and songwriting. But Bowie? He lumped him in with Rod Stewart and Elton John, artists he clearly didn't respect at the time. His tone was cold, and it wasn't just about style. It was personal. One thing that really rubbed Harrison the wrong way was Bowie's hit song Fame, which he co-wrote with John Lennon. Given that Lennon was one of Harrison's closest friends, you'd think he might go easy on it. But no, he flat out said he didn't like the song. Maybe it was too commercial for him. Maybe he just didn't enjoy its funky, danceable vibe. Either way, it wasn't his thing. But it went deeper than that. Harrison was frustrated with Bowie's constant image changes, from Ziggy Stardust to the thin white Duke and everything in between. Instead of seeing it as creative, he saw it as confusing. He even made a sharp comment about Bowie's gender-bending style, saying he ought to make up his mind what sexy is, and then decide what kind of music he wants to play. It wasn't just a critique. It was a clear sign of discomfort with Bowie's androgyny and theatricality. To Harrison, Bowie's ever-shifting image seemed like a circus. And coming from someone who had embraced Hinduism, meditation, and stripped-down music, Bowie's glam rock world felt like too much noise. It's worth noting that they had mutual friends. Monty Python's Eric Idle, for example, was close to both and even tried to get them to connect. But their worlds were just too different. Bowie loved pushing limits and performing with flair. Harrison craved depth, calm, and truth. Whether Harrison's comments came from a bad mood or deep-seated frustration isn't totally clear. But one thing is, he didn't like what Bowie represented. Bowie challenged the norms of masculinity in music, while Harrison leaned into tradition, faith, and minimalism. Still, history has room for both of them. One searched for spiritual peace. The other searched for artistic transformation. And while Harrison didn't see eye to eye with Bowie, both men left legacies that shaped music forever. Number 4. Elton John, from Best Friends to Cold Silence. At first, David Bowie and Elton John were like two stars in the same sky, flamboyant, bold, and changing the music world from the heart of London. They bonded in the late 60s and early 70s, hitting nightclubs, celebrating their rising fame, and enjoying the wild rock scene together. Their friendship made sense. Both were showmen, both loved pushing boundaries, and both had the kind of charisma that lit up a room. But that early spark didn't last. The moment everything changed came during a 1976 Rolling Stone interview. Bowie, deep into his drug-fueled Thin White Duke era, made a flippant comment that hit Elton hard. He referred to Elton as rock and roll's token queen. At the time, Elton hadn't come out publicly, though his style and presence had sparked rumors for years. To Elton, that one-liner wasn't funny. It felt cruel. He later described it as snotty and unnecessary, and he believed Bowie was likely high when he said it. Still, whether Bowie meant it as a joke or not, the damage was done. Their friendship never recovered. They stopped speaking. The warm connection they'd once had was gone for good. And yet, Elton never lost respect for Bowie's talent. Even after that hurtful comment, he continued to call Bowie a genius, someone who could reinvent himself like no one else. But he also admitted that even during their friendship, Bowie was hard to understand. Elton is naturally warm, open, and sociable. Bowie was distant, mysterious, and kept people at arm's length. As time passed, their careers took very different paths. Bowie went deeper into experimental music and theatrical concepts. Elton became a global pop icon with a more mainstream sound. But they remained two of the most influential artists of their generation. When Bowie passed away in 2016, Elton publicly reflected on their broken friendship. He said he regretted that they never patched things up. In his words, "Life's too short to hold grudges." He forgave Bowie in his heart, even though they never got the chance to do it in person. It's a reminder that even the biggest stars have real emotions and relationships that break down, sometimes over things that feel small in hindsight, but leave lasting pain. What started as a friendship between two creative powerhouses ended with silence. And that silence lingered until it was too late. Number 5. Frank Zappa, F off, Captain Tom. Frank Zappa didn't play games. He didn't do small talk, didn't tolerate industry politics, and definitely didn't take kindly to other musicians stepping into his world. So when David Bowie tried to recruit one of Zappa's own band members in the late 70s, things exploded fast and face to face. It all started in 1978. Bowie was gearing up for a new tour and had his eye on Adrian Belew, a wildly talented guitarist playing in Zappa's band at the time. Bowie loved musicians who pushed boundaries, and Bowie fit that perfectly. So, during one of Zappa's concerts in Germany, Bowie made his move. While Zappa was lost in one of his extended guitar solos, Bowie stepped aside for a break, and that's when Bowie swooped in. He casually approached Bowie and invited him to join his band for the upcoming tour. Bowie was flattered and open to the idea, so they agreed to talk more after the show. Later that night, Bowie took Bowie out to dinner to discuss the offer. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, until Zappa walked into the same restaurant. Zappa saw them, and he was furious. Rather than wait or cool off, Zappa walked straight over to their table. No hello, no polite words. He looked Bowie dead in the eye and told him to F off. Bowie, ever the smooth talker, tried to laugh it off. Come on, Frank, he said. Surely we can be gentlemen about this. But Zappa wasn't interested in being civil. Instead, he mocked Bowie by calling him Captain Tom, a sarcastic jab at Bowie's space oddity character, Major Tom. The message was clear. Zappa thought Bowie was a spacey poser, more image than substance. The conversation ended there. Bowie left with Bowie, trying to play it cool. Later, he even joked, "Well, that went rather well." But beneath the humor, it was obvious. Zappa had zero respect for him. Despite the drama, Bowie eventually did leave Zappa's band to join Bowie. He became a key part of Bowie's Isolar 2 tour and played on the larger album. His quirky, experimental guitar style added something fresh to Bowie's evolving sound. But Zappa, he never let it go. Unlike some of Bowie's other critics, who mellowed with time, Zappa never said a kind word about him. He likely saw Bowie as everything he hated about mainstream rock: flashy, opportunistic, and too focused on image. For Bowie, it may have just been a funny story about clashing egos. For Zappa, it was proof that Bowie didn't play by the rules, and that was unforgivable. Number 6. Paul McCartney, respect, but no real connection. Out of all the artists who had issues with David Bowie, Paul McCartney's situation wasn't a loud or dramatic feud. It was more of a quiet disconnect. There was no screaming match, no public jabs. But behind the smiles and polite interviews, there was a sense that something between them just didn't click. Both men were giants in music, both from the UK, both legends in their own right. But where Bowie chased reinvention and embraced the strange, Paul always leaned into melody, tradition, and warmth. Bowie was the chameleon. McCartney was the classic songwriter. Their musical philosophies were worlds apart. For years, fans wondered why they never worked together. Bowie had collaborated with John Lennon on the hit Fame, and had shared admiration with George Harrison early on, even if that relationship later soured. But with Paul, it was different. There were few stories, no joint sessions, barely any public photos together. Just a strange, noticeable distance. The only real connection came during the 1980s charity supergroup project Band Aid, where both participated, but not side by side. Later, in the 90s, they were briefly spotted at the same award shows or tribute events, but always seemed to orbit one another without truly meeting in the middle. Some music insiders say Bowie felt Paul was too safe. He saw McCartney as someone stuck in a pop formula, never venturing far from the Beatles' glow. Bowie, on the other hand, was busy making boundary-pushing albums like Low and Heroes. He may have quietly viewed Paul as outdated. Meanwhile, Paul, always friendly and diplomatic, never spoke ill of Bowie. But when Bowie passed away in 2016, Paul's tribute was surprisingly short. He posted a kind but generic message calling Bowie a great star and fantastic artist. It felt distant, almost like they had never really known each other. Compared to the emotional outpouring from other artists, Paul's words were polite, but cold. In the end, it wasn't hate. It was a mutual disconnect. They respected each other from afar, but never found common ground. Bowie might have seen Paul as part of the old guard. Paul might have seen Bowie as too strange, too distant, too theatrical. Still, their music helped shape different parts of rock history. One was the polished pop craftsman, the other, the fearless transformer. Maybe their paths were just never meant to cross.